Stop. That badge isn't yours.
I'm a nurse on shift. My badge just scanned.
You're not staff.
Call my supervisor. Verify it.
Step away from the door. Now.
The badge reader blinked green. The door unlocked, and the officer still stepped in front of her, like it never happened. "Stop," he said. Nurse Simone Ellis froze with one gloved hand still on the push bar, the other gripping a medication cooler that was sweating condensation onto her sleeve. Behind her, the corridor hummed with the low machinery of a hospital that never sleeps. Ventilation, monitors, distant voices, the squeak of rubber soles on polished tile. It was 2:13 a.m., the hour where you can feel the building's heartbeat, the hour where the ICU is lit like a spaceship and everyone speaks in half whispers because you're always one alarm away from running. Simone's scrubs were navy, her hair was tied back tight, her ID badge hung from a lanyard stamped with the hospital's name in clean white letters. She looked exactly like what she was, a registered nurse on shift. Officer Trent Malloy didn't care. He pointed at her chest as if he'd discovered a forgery. "That badge isn't yours," he said. Simone blinked. "What?" Malloy's jaw tightened. "You heard me. You're not staff." The sentence didn't just sound wrong, it sounded impossible. Simone worked nights at St. Bridget's Medical Center. She had for 9 years. She'd trained new nurses, stabilized hemorrhaging patients, talked terrified families through the worst moments of their lives. She knew the smell of this building the way you know your own home. And now, a rookie officer, with a security patch and a body camera, was telling her she didn't belong in the place that paid her, relied on her, and trusted her with life and death decisions. "Officer," Simone said carefully, "I'm a charge nurse on 4 West. I need to get this medication to a patient." Malloy stepped closer. "No," he said, voice sharper. "You need to step away from that door." Simone's pulse jumped, not because she feared being late, because she recognized the ikotai, posture, authority that doesn't want facts, authority that wants compliance. "Call my supervisor," Simone said. "Call the unit. Call the nursing office. Verify." Malloy's eyes narrowed. "You're impersonating staff," he repeated. "That's a crime." Simone stared at him. A crime, in a hallway where every second mattered. Her patient's name was on the label in her hand. A real patient, a real medication, a real assignment. And in that moment, the hospital's cameras, overhead CCTV, a nursing station lens, and Malloy's own body camera, started building the record that would later cost the hospital and the city a $2.6 million settlement. Not because the story was complex, because it was simple. A nurse doing her job, an officer refusing to verify, and a system that allowed a misunderstanding to harden into humiliation. Rewind before the badge, before the door, before the word impersonating turned a professional into a suspect. Simone Ellis wasn't the kind of person who looked for conflict. She was the kind of person who prevented it. 38 years old, raised in a small apartment where her mother worked 2 jobs and her grandmother believed in church, discipline, and the power of a steady hand. Simone didn't become a nurse because she wanted praise. She became a nurse because she wanted competence, something you can carry, something that doesn't depend on who likes you. In high school, she volunteered at a nursing home. She learned how to lift patients without hurting them. She learned how to speak to people who were confused without making them feel stupid. She learned how to keep her voice soft when someone else was scared. Nursing school nearly broke her. Clinical rotations, exams, the kind of pressure that makes you question whether you belong in the room. But Simone did what she always did. She outworked doubt. She graduated, passed boards, started at St. Bridget's on nights, because nights were where you learned the most. Less staff, more emergencies, no room for ego, and over time, She became the nurse people asked for, not because she was loud, because she was steady. When a resident panicked, Simone steadied them. When a family was angry, Simone translated fear into words. When a patient crashed, Simone moved like she'd rehearsed it 1,000 times. Because she had. St. Bridget's Medical Center was a fortress of glass and concrete on the edge of downtown. A trauma center, a teaching hospital, a place where ambulances arrived like clockwork and every hallway had a different kind of urgency. It was also, like many hospitals, a place that had been tightening security, not because something was always happening, because administrators feared what could happen. There had been a string of incidents across the region. Patients attacked, visitors brought weapons, an impersonator caught wandering into a restricted wing in a borrowed lab coat. Hospitals responded the way institutions do. Policies, new badge systems, additional security, and, quietly, a bigger reliance on officers to do more than protect. They were asked to enforce order, and when officers are asked to enforce order, they start deciding who looks like order. Officer Trent Malloy had been assigned to St. Bridget's for 8 weeks. He wasn't a city patrol cop. He was part of a hospital police unit, sworn officers employed through a public-private arrangement that gave them authority on campus. Malloy was 26, new haircut, hard stare, the kind of new that still believed every question was a challenge. He'd transferred from a small district where most calls were noise complaints and shoplifting reports. Now he worked in a hospital where people cried in elevators and arguments erupted in waiting rooms, and everyone expected him to fix it by standing tall. Malloy wanted to prove himself. He wanted to be the officer who caught the threat. He wanted to be the one supervisors trusted, and he had a bias he didn't think of as bias. He thought of it as instinct. 2 days before Simone's incident, a memo had circulated. Badge fraud, unauthorized access, reminder, verify credentials. It included a grainy screenshot from a hallway camera, someone in scrubs pushing a cart. No clear face, no clear name, just the warning, do not assume. Malloy read it like it was a mission, but the memo's key word was verify. Malloy's interpretation was challenge, and that difference between verify and challenge was about to cost everyone. Simone's shift started at 7 p.m. By 8:30, the unit was already loud with the quiet kind of chaos. Monitors chirping, IV pumps alarming, a resident asking for labs, a family calling every 10 minutes. Simone walked the halls with a clipboard and a posture that told her staff, "I'm here." She checked on Mr. Ramsey in room 412, post-op complications. She reassured a new nurse who'd never started vasopressors before. She coordinated a transfer. She called pharmacy. She did the invisible labor that keeps a hospital from becoming a disaster. Around 1:45 a.m., an order came in for a time-sensitive medication, a high-risk patient on a different wing. The label wasn't a suggestion, it was a schedule. Simone called pharmacy, confirmed dosage, and was told the medication was ready at a secure cabinet in the staff-only corridor connecting 4 West to the ICU wing. It was an efficient route, a restricted route, a route that required a badge. She grabbed the cooler and headed out. No drama, no fear, just work. The staff corridor was empty when she arrived. The lighting was bright but sterile, designed to keep people awake. A faint smell of bleach hovered in the air. The walls were lined with authorized personnel only signs that nobody read anymore. Simone scanned her badge. The reader beeped. Green. The door released. That's when Malloy stepped into the hallway. He wasn't sprinting. He wasn't responding to an alarm. He was walking as if he'd been waiting. "Stop," he said. Simone paused. "Hi," she replied, polite, because nurses are trained to keep the temperature down in every room. "I'm on 4 West. I need to grab a med from the cabinet. Malloy's eyes flicked to her badge, then past her, then back. Where'd you get that badge? He asked. Simone blinked. It's my badge, she said. From HR, like everyone else. Malloy stepped closer. Take it off, he ordered. Simone's stomach tightened. Officer, she said, still calm, I can show you my employee number. You can call the unit, but I can't take my badge off while I'm moving meds through restricted areas. That's policy. Malloy's jaw clenched. I'm telling you, he said, you're not staff. Simone stared. In her years at St. Bridget's, she'd dealt with angry families, drunk patients, residents who tried to blame nurses for their mistakes. She'd never dealt with this, an officer insisting she didn't belong while she stood in a hallway that literally opened for her badge. I don't know what you think you're seeing, Simone said carefully, but I'm a registered nurse. You can verify that in 2 minutes. Malloy's voice rose. 2 minutes is 2 minutes too long if you're a trespasser, he snapped. Trespasser. In a hospital. At 2 a.m. Simone felt heat rise in her chest. She forced it down, because she knew what happens when you match an officer's intensity. The story changes. You become the problem. So she stayed measured. Officer, she said, I'm requesting you contact my supervisor. My unit is expecting me back. My patient is time-sensitive. Malloy's hand drifted toward his cuffs. Put the cooler down, he said. Simone didn't move. That's a medication, she said. I'm not leaving it unattended. Malloy's eyes narrowed. You want to obstruct, he asked. Obstruct, a word that turns professionalism into defiance. Simone took a slow breath. I want you to verify, she said. That's not obstruction, that's procedure. Malloy's mouth tightened. Turn around, he said. Simone froze. The hallway felt suddenly smaller, the fluorescent lights harsher, the cooler heavier. Are you serious? She asked. Malloy's voice went cold. I said turn around, he repeated. If you're staff, this will clear up. If you're not, you're going to jail. Simone stared at him. Jail. For a nurse, in scrubs, holding medication, her badge on display, her hospital lanyard visible. She looked past Malloy and saw a security camera mounted above the door. She made a decision. She spoke to the record. For the camera, Simone said, voice steady. I am Nurse Simone Ellis, RN, charge nurse on 4. West, my badge scanned green. I am requesting verification. This officer is threatening to detain me. Malloy flinched slightly. People flinch when you name the truth out loud. Don't talk to the camera, he snapped. Simone didn't raise her voice. I'm talking to reality, she replied. And in the seconds that followed, the incident stopped being a disagreement. It became a chain of escalation that would pull in supervisors, administrators, attorneys, and eventually a settlement agreement. Malloy keyed his radio. Need a supervisor, he said. Possible impersonator in staff corridor. Female subject refusing commands. Female subject, not nurse, not staff, subject. Simone felt the insult land, because she knew what that language does. It shrinks you, it strips you, it makes it easier to control you. A door down the hall opened. A respiratory therapist stepped out, eyes widening. Simone, he said. Simone nodded. Hey, Jamal, can you call 4 West and tell them I'm being detained? Malloy snapped. Sir, get back inside. Jamal froze. The hospital isn't a street. People aren't used to officers barking at each other in clinical halls. Jamal backed up slowly, but he didn't go far. He pulled out his phone, and now there were 2 cameras, not just the hospital's, a human one. Malloy took another step closer. He reached for Simone's arm. Simone shifted back, not aggressive, protective. Malloy interpreted it as resistance. Stop moving, he barked. Simone lifted her hands. I'm not resisting, she said. Do not touch me. Call my supervisor. Malloy's eyes flashed. Drop the cooler, he repeated. Simone swallowed. She could feel herself balancing two risks, the risk of leaving medication, the risk of escalation. She set the cooler down slowly, placing it against the wall like it was fragile, because it was. Malloy stepped in. Turn around, he said. Simone's voice stayed steady. Officer, she said, if you put cuffs on me, you are delaying patient care. Malloy didn't answer. He reached. Metal touched her wrist, and the corridor, sterile, bright, designed for healing, suddenly felt like a scene. A nurse in cuffs, a rookie officer with a hard face, a respiratory therapist filming, a medication cooler sweating against the wall, and in the background, somewhere behind the doors, a monitor alarmed and stopped. The hospital didn't pause. It kept moving. That's what made it cruel. A supervisor arrived at 2:21 a.m. Sergeant Marla Keene, older, tired eyes, the kind of supervisor who has seen enough to recognize disasters early. She stepped into the corridor, took one look at Simone in cuffs, and her face hardened. What is this? Keene demanded. Malloy spoke fast. Possible impersonator, he said. Badge fraud. She refused to comply. I detained pending verification. Keene's eyes flicked to Simone. Ma'am, she asked, controlled, what's your name? Simone didn't hesitate. Simone Ellis, she said. Charge nurse, 4 West. I scanned in. I asked him to verify. He refused and cuffed me. Keene's eyes narrowed. She looked at Simone's badge, then at the lanyard, then at Malloy. Did you scan the badge? Keene asked. Malloy hesitated. It scanned at the door, he said. Keene stared. So it scanned, she repeated. And you still cuffed her? Malloy's voice tightened. Badges can be stolen, he said. Keene exhaled. Then you verify, she snapped. You don't cuff first. Keene pulled out her radio. Nursing supervisor on duty, she said into it. Need confirmation on Simone Ellis, RN. A pause. Then a voice crackled back. She's ours, the voice said. Charge nurse. Why? Keene's jaw tightened. Copy, she replied. She turned to Malloy. Remove the yardie. Cuffs, she said. Malloy hesitated. Keene's voice dropped. Now. The key clicked. Metal loosened. Simone rubbed her wrist once, not because it hurt, because it was real. A red line, a small mark, a public record on skin. Keene turned to Simone, voice softer. Ma'am, she said, I apologize. Simone didn't soften. She couldn't. Not with a patient waiting, not with her dignity still on the floor. She nodded once. I need to deliver that medication, she said. Keene stepped aside. Go, she said. Simone bent, picked up the cooler, and walked past Malloy. She didn't glare. She didn't curse. She moved like someone who had learned to swallow shock and keep working. Because patients don't care what happened to you. They just need you. Simone delivered the medication. She confirmed the infusion. She documented administration. She gave report. She did her job. But when she returned to her unit, her hands were shaking, slightly as she washed them. Not fear, adrenaline. Her charge nurse headset felt heavier. The hallway sounded louder. And when a new nurse asked her if she was okay, Simone said the sentence nurses say when they're not okay. I'm fine. By morning, the story had already started spreading. Not because Simone posted it, because Jamal did. He didn't post it as drama. He posted it as proof. A short clip, a nurse in cuffs, an officer saying, Impersonator, a supervisor saying, remove the cuffs. People in the hospital group chat reacted with shock, some with anger, some with a familiar resignation. And then, outside the hospital, the clip found a larger audience, because few images hit harder than a nurse being treated like a criminal, in the place she saves lives. The hospital administration responded quickly, not because they were brave, because they were terrified. A public hospital doesn't fear only lawsuits. It fears trust loss, patients, choosing another facility, donors pausing, accreditation questions. The hospital issued a statement about an unfortunate misunderstanding. They promised review. They placed Malloy on administrative leave pending investigation. But Simone wasn't interested in slogans, because she knew what happens when institutions control the narrative. They compress harm into a phrase, misunderstanding, inconvenience, process, and then, later, they move on, unless you force them not to. Simone filed a formal complaint that afternoon. She requested the body cam, the corridor CCTV, the radio logs, the dispatch audio. She requested all written reports. She requested Malloy's training history. And she requested something that made administrators uncomfortable, a clear policy change. Because the core problem wasn't that Malloy was rude. The core problem was that he had authority and used it before checking facts. Here's where the story takes a turn. People don't expect, because the incident wasn't only about one rookie officer, it was about a system glitch. 2 weeks earlier, the hospital had rolled out new ID badges, updated design, new lanyards, a new access control system, and, for a short window, some badges had been printed without photos due to a supplier delay. Simone's new badge had her name, her title, her employee number, but her photo was missing, a placeholder square, a temporary issue, the kind of minor administrative inconvenience that should never become handcuffs. Malloy saw the missing photo and treated it like proof. He saw a black woman in scrubs and decided she didn't fit his expectation of staff, and because he didn't trust her words, he didn't verify. He punished. That detail, missing photo, became the district's defense. They tried to frame it as confusion. They argued the officer believed the badge could be stolen. They argued patient safety. They argued caution. But the footage undercut them. Because caution looks like verification, it looks like calling the nursing office, it looks like scanning an employee number, it looks like asking a supervisor, it does not look like cuffing a nurse in a corridor. During discovery, the plaintiff's attorneys found something else. The hospital had been warned, not about Simone, about the security unit. Months earlier, a committee of physicians and nurses had submitted concerns that security officers were overstepping and escalating clinical disputes. There were internal emails describing security officers who treated staff like suspects. There was a memo recommending de-escalation training and clearer limits on detaining employees. The hospital had acknowledged the memo, then filed it, then moved on. Because hospitals are busy, and busy institutions often treat human harm as a secondary problem, until it becomes a legal one. There was also a more personal twist. In the week before the incident, Simone had filed a separate report, not about Malloy, about another security officer who had yelled at a patient's teenage brother in the waiting room. Simone had stepped in. Calm, firm, she'd asked the officer to lower his voice. She'd reminded him that families were already scared. Malloy had been in the vicinity. He'd heard her. He'd watched her correct security. And in the body cam, when he confronted her later, there was an edge. Not just suspicion, irritation, as if he resented being corrected by someone he didn't instinctively respect. That mattered, because it suggested motive beyond policy, not necessarily conscious, but real, a thin thread of ego, and ego, paired with authority, is dangerous. As the case moved forward, the hospital's lawyers tried to minimize. They argued she wasn't arrested. They argued the cuffs were brief. They argued no physical injury. Simone's attorney didn't let them float in. Abstraction. He anchored everything to the setting. A hospital, a place where dignity is already fragile. where staff are exhausted, where patients are vulnerable, where the sight of a nurse in cuffs can ripple into fear. He argued emotional distress. He argued reputational harm. He argued interference with employment. He argued the chilling effect on staff who now wondered if their own badge could be questioned. And then he played the video. The video where Simone calmly asked for verification, the video where Malloy refused, the video where a supervisor corrected him in seconds, the video where the badge reader flashed green, and still the cuffs went on. If you've ever worked nights in a hospital, you know how small a moment can feel in the moment, then how huge it becomes later, because the hospital day is built from tiny interactions, a calm voice, a quick check, a shared understanding of urgency. Malloy didn't share that understanding. He brought street control into clinical space. And the harm wasn't only Simone's wrist, it was the signal that staff belonging could be questioned at any time, that compliance mattered more than care, that a nurse's word wasn't worth the 2 minutes it would take to verify. Public reaction intensified. Nurses across the city shared stories. Doctors commented. Patients weighed in. Some people tried to make it about security needs. Others asked the obvious question, how do you think it's safer to cuff a nurse than to verify her badge? That question haunted the hospital, because there wasn't a good answer, and here's where the legal pressure turned into settlement pressure. The hospital's insurance carrier got involved. Risk managers reviewed the footage. They reviewed internal emails. They reviewed Malloy's training record. And they saw what every attorney sees when video exists. A jury, a nurse, a hospital corridor, a rookie officer calling her an impersonator, a supervisor undoing it in seconds. That's not a complicated trial. That's an emotional one. And emotional trials are expensive. Negotiations began. The hospital offered a quiet number. Simone declined, not because she wanted a jackpot, because she wanted accountability and policy change. She wanted limits. She wanted training. She wanted a clear rule, verification before detention. Because if this could happen to her, experienced, credentialed, known in the building, it could happen to anyone. A travel nurse, a newly hired CNA, a respiratory therapist, a doctor in scrubs who didn't look like what someone expected. After months of back and forth, the settlement landed. $2.6 million. It came with the standard legal language. No admission of wrongdoing. A resolution of claims. Confidential terms in places. But the consequences were visible. The hospital changed protocols. Badge verification procedures were clarified. Security. Officers were required to contact nursing administration before detaining any staff member absent an immediate safety threat. Use of restraints policies were rewritten to include clinical environment restrictions. Body cam review audits were established for any cuffing on campus, and a joint committee of nurses, doctors, and security leadership was created to review future incidents. Not because committees fix everything, because the hospital needed a record that it tried. Malloy didn't get a dramatic public firing. Institutions don't like drama. They like paperwork. He was reassigned, placed under supervision, removed from staff corridors. Whether he later resigned or stayed became part of the administrative fog. But inside the hospital, everyone understood. The incident became a cautionary story, a story told to new security hires, a story whispered in break rooms, a story nurses referenced when they clipped their badges on tighter. Simone kept working. That's the part people underestimate. They think a settlement ends the story. It doesn't. You still walk the same halls. You still hear the same alarms. You still pass the same cameras. Only now you carry a memory. The memory of being treated like you didn't belong. The memory of metal on your wrist. The memory of your patient's medications sweating against the wall while someone decided your identity was negotiable. One night, months later, a new nurse asked Simone, quietly. "How did you stay calm?" Simone paused. She didn't answer with hero language. She answered with truth. "Because if I raised my voice," she said, "he would have called it aggression, and I didn't have the luxury of giving him that." The new nurse stared. Simone added, "We save lives in here, but sometimes you have to save yourself too." And that's what this story really is. Not just a settlement, a lesson about verification, a lesson about how quickly authority can go wrong when it replaces questions with commands. A lesson about how institutions rely on nurses and still fail to protect them from humiliation. If you've ever been in a hospital at 2 a.m., you know it's a world of its own. A bright, sterile universe where people bleed quietly and hope shows up in scrubs. On that night, the hospital's promise cracked because the person with a badge didn't trust the person with a stethoscope. He trusted his certainty, and certainty, unchecked, became cuffs. The badge reader blinked green. The door unlocked. Simone belonged. The system proved it, but one officer refused to accept it until a supervisor forced him to. That refusal is what cost $2.6 million. Not because money can measure dignity, because money is the only language institutions reliably understand. So here's the question worth sitting with, just for a moment. If a nurse can be called an impersonator in her own hospital while her badge scans green, what does that say about how often verification is skipped in favor of assumption? And how many times does that assumption go unrecorded because there's no camera, no witness, no supervisor arriving in time? Simone's story didn't become a lesson because it was rare. It became a lesson because it was familiar. A professional doing her job. A challenge rooted in perception. An escalation that didn't need to happen. And a record that forced a system to admit, through policy changes and a settlement check, that verification is not optional. Not in a hospital, not anywhere. Because when verification comes after the cuffs, the damage is already done.